All right, what's up, Miss Steele? We're back again with substantially worse audio quality because they kind of boomed our recording studio, but that's okay. We're in Mr. Jackson's room. Thanks, Mr. Jackson. So today we are here with a presentation on Europe and the African front up to about mid-1943. It's us three again. It's me, obviously, Viraj, and we got Ari.
What's up, guys?
Yeah.
Hey.
All right, let's go.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so before World War II, Neville Chamberlain, Prime Minister of Great Britain, and other European leaders had a policy of appeasement when it came to Hitler taking land. Let him do it, as long as he's not doing too much, but obviously that didn't work. He took large parts of the Czechoslovakia.
With the Sudetenland. And so the main thing about that was Hitler wanted Lebensraum, which is like living space for Germans. And so his rationale for taking the Sudetenland was that there were a lot of native Germans in that area. And so he was trying to unite all the German-speaking peoples. But then after he took the Sudetenland, he then took Czechoslovakia, and then Britain was like, okay, Britain and France were like, take no more, that's it. And so Neville Chamberlain returned home, and he said that there would be peace in our time. But then Germany invades Poland, and then that's when basically the Britain
World
and
War
France,
started.
they were true to their word, and they declared war. And that's where the phony war happens.
Germany had a thing called Blitzkrieg. It's basically large offensive and really quickly, and they used that successfully in taking over Netherlands, Belgium, France, Norway, most of Western Europe except for the UK.
So the Blitzkrieg is actually really important because it's a large-scale employment of heavy armor, air power, and artillery to quickly destabilize and then push through a front. And it was a really revolutionary strategy that allowed Germany to essentially steamroll through Europe. So Britain, after the fall of France and its kind of subjugation into the Vichy French Republic, Britain was actually the last remaining Western European power that fought on the side of the Allies. So Neville Chamberlain, the kind of pacifist prime minister of Britain, resigned, and Churchill, the very belligerent pro-war prime minister, came into power, and he kind of regulated the defense and improvement of the British military power. However, France had fallen, and one of the first things that Churchill presided over was the evacuation at Dunkirk. So about 300,000 British soldiers were stuck in the French port of Dunkirk after France had fallen.
French too.
Yeah, and a lot of the Free French soldiers as well. So civilian vessels and even British naval ships were used to take British and French soldiers off the beaches and back to Britain, and they were able to take 85% of their...
it was really good, but then they lost a lot of tanks and a
lot of their equipment was left there. So the Battle of Britain. The British RAF, which is the Royal Air Force, was able to defend British airspace against the Axis bombings. So the RAF had a couple of unique advantages. They had the chain home radar system, which is a notable advantage for the Allies in general in the Pacific Theater and in the Battle of Britain. But the RAF also had the Spitfire, which was arguably the best air-to-air fighter of the time. And even with extremely inexperienced pilots, most of them only had about 36 hours of training before they were wheeled up and fighting.
And they were like fighting constantly, so a lot of the pilots were like really bogged down.
Yeah, they were on like 10-minute standby to take off. As soon as the radar system went off, they would basically have to take off. So the Battle of Britain was long and hard, and London got bombed. Most manufacturing centers on the British Isles got bombed. But eventually Germany, after taking a lot of losses in their bomber corps and having to divert resources to the east, kind of gave up and postponed the bombing and invasion of England. All right, North Africa campaign. So Operation Compass was the initial British and Commonwealth, so Australian, Indian, British, plan in Northern Africa. Basically, British forces in British Egypt around the Suez Canal pushed out into Italian Libya and fought a series of decisive battles there. The most important was Tobruk, where the Italians attempted to siege the British fortress at Tobruk for 271 days, and this siege was eventually broken, and the Italians took incredible losses. The Battle of Bardia, 15,000 Australian troops defeated 45,000 Italian troops and lost 131 men. basically all of these were conclusive battles in favor of the British, and the Italians were getting pushed back throughout the entire war. But the script is kind of flipped in 1941 when the Afrika Panzer Corps and Erwin Rommel arrive in Africa.
Desert Fox.
Yeah, the Desert Fox.
Yeah.
Arguably the coolest guy to ever fight for the Nazis, although it's not like a highly contested title. I mean, Charles Lindbergh, but he was more like a cheerleader. Anyway, North Africa. Rommel's offensives were really, really successful, partially because his tanks were much better than anything the Allies had at the time. The Crusader III would be outdated and replaced by American tanks in a few years. But, and also because he was an incredible tactician, he was able to take back a lot of the territory that the Italians had lost, most notably the fortress, again, at Tobruk, he took in 6 days. The Allied forces were pushed back into British Egypt until British forces, with American support and Commonwealth troops, defeated Rommel at the Second Battle of El Alamein, which is regarded as the turning point of the Africa campaign.
Oh yeah, did you talk about how they're trying to get the Suez Canal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you can do it.
Oh, Operation Torch. Yeah.
Yeah. So Operation Torch. We'll do this together. Was the kind of Allied invasion of northern Africa. So it was a 3-point landing in several sections of what was then French northern Africa, and also some Italian-controlled areas. So American forces and British forces wearing American uniforms so they wouldn't annoy the French, basically pushed into northern Africa in 3 places. There was a large naval battle at Casablanca, which the Americans decisively won. And American forces were fully deployed in the North African theater, which would be their first major theater of the war. The first battle in which they were involved in a major role was the Battle of Kasserine Pass, which was a fairly decisive German victory.
Yeah,
So-
but then Patton, he basically led a counterattack, and they really started pushing back the Germans.
Right, because the Germans were running out of supplies because Rommel had way overpushed his supply lines when he had tried to move towards Tobruk. So they were eventually pushed back by American and renewed British kind of enthusiasm. And then the remnants of...
Yeah, I think Rommel tried to persuade Hitler to
Good
go
morning,
back.
Saxon.
Get the
Momentarily,
troops.
the bell will ring, concluding our school day.
Oh.
At that time, I would ask drivers
Take
and
this as an
walkers
intermission, you know,
to go ahead and
Yeah.
make your way
have a drink of
out.
water, short break.
Contemplate.
Yeah, what we've said.
Absorb.
Yeah,
So
just
that you were
really
at
absorb
your
the
bus
information.
promptly at
Yeah.
11:50 for departure.
I'll take the end of the
Teachers,
slide,
we look
because it's a
forward
good
to seeing
segue.
everyone this afternoon at 12:30 in the library.
Yeah, so
Again,
Rommel.
walkers and drivers, please
On
stay
job,
once
bro.
the bell rings. Thanks,
yes.
guys. Have a great day. Go Saxon.
All right.
Cool.
All right, go Saxons. Anyway, so Rommel really wanted to pull out of Africa, but then Hitler said no, you gotta stay there. And this actually happens a lot throughout the war.
And here's the thing. So, 2 major things happened because of the war in Africa. One, the U.S. chose war in Africa. So, it pissed off the Soviet Union because they wanted America to go invade France. And another thing, because Germany was too delayed helping Italy with their shenanigans with Britain, it's often blamed for Germany losing in Stalingrad. Speaking of which, Stalingrad is the deadliest battle in human history. During the winter of 1942 and 43, Hitler enacted Operation Barbarossa, which was the largest military invasion of all time.
Yeah.
However,
The really important thing about this was that when they invaded Poland, Germany and the Soviet Union, they had a pact of non-aggression.
yeah,
But then Hitler kind of betrays them, and
this is what happens.
this
And
is what happens. Yeah.
the Soviet Union basically hugged the Germans in terms of combat. And, when Soviet airplanes came and bombed the German army, they also killed a lot of Russians. So, even though the Soviet Union won, they suffered more, especially when it came to civilian
And this is
population.
important later on because the Germany heavily attacked and raped a lot of the Russian citizens. So then when Russia pushed back against Germany, they fought with equal ferocity, especially against the citizens.
And of course, with all the memes, the Russian winter was too much for the poor Germans to handle. I had to say it. And FDR was actually elated after the victory at Stalingrad that he approved the invasion of Sicily, along with the Soviet Union and Great Britain.
Right. It's also worth noting that Stalin refused to evacuate the city of Stalingrad
Yeah.
because he didn't think anyone would defend an empty city, which is one of the reasons the battle was so deadly, because you're basically firing artillery and explosives inside a neighborhood.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Steele, for listening to us. And yeah, hopefully you got the gist.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. And yeah, bye.